Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, two local companies are making some noise in the microchip manufacturing world. Who are they, and what kind of impact are they having in the global microchip or semiconductor production business? Does it mean we won't see new vehicles fresh off the production line sitting idle in auto manufacturing plant parking lots, waiting for microchips being produced in Asia and elsewhere? That's something we've seen in recent years. A local man who is working on the front lines of helping to cultivate the microchip semiconductor industry statewide is with us tonight. And for those of you interested in a career in this fast-moving, forward-thinking business, you definitely need to tune in. But first, we have viewer feedback from last week's show here on the follow-up, where we discussed important health issues with two county health officers. One of our viewers dialed into our follow-up hotline to voice this opinion.
You had two very good people there interviewed, but I think there was a question that should have been asked, which wasn't. One mentioned that there's a shortage of healthcare workers. One nurse told me a week or so ago that it's 40% less than they were before COVID. And then the other thing was that you talked about the harm being done by fentanyl, but what about the question of where the fentanyl is coming from? Fentanyl is coming from Mexico, supplied by China, and they use the cartels as their boots on the ground to get it into the United States. I wish you could have asked the question of, where this is coming from, not just treat the symptoms, but the cause.
That's a very good point, and thanks for dialing in. We appreciate the feedback, and we would like to hear from more of you to help drive the conversation here on the follow-up. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media and Facebook. You can dial into our follow-up hotline, as that viewer just did, to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. Or you can comment on YouTube as well. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows this season, you can log on to deltapublicmedia.org. As for tonight's show, in studio, as you can see, we have Chris Rishko. He is the Director of Talent Solutions with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So first of all, let's just tell us sort of about your role at the MEDC as the Director of Talent Solutions, or Talent Acquisition, I guess you could call it that, and your role specifically in sort of growing this semiconductor microchip industry in the state, particularly here in mid-Michigan.
Ultimately, my role comes from the need to help grow the state's economy, and more importantly, our population. So over the last several years, our population in the state of Michigan has been fairly stagnant, fairly level. Since COVID, we've actually lost about 2%. That's definitely a trend we need to reverse. And so part of that is trying to help remind not just current residents, but potential residents, that there is a lot of opportunity here in Michigan. And part of that also is really working with employers that are already here, as well as those who are going to look to come to Michigan, of all the outstanding talent that is here, all the opportunity that is here as well, with the great institutions such as Delta College that are here in the state, willing to work together to create a unified talent pipeline to really help drive the economy of Michigan forward.
And prior to this role, you were with Great Lakes Bay Michigan Works, so talent acquisition is sort of in your background, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's very few other ways to help really create a sustainable life for someone, other than give them a career that they can help provide a living wage. And so my current role really built from that last one of understanding what the labor market looks like, what workforce development looks like here in Michigan, and being able to translate that to a statewide landscape, and really to appeal to where the gaps are and how we need to fill them.
And your wheelhouse in your job is a little bit with sort of the semiconductor, microchip, also EVs, right?
Absolutely.
But you'll kind of go anywhere depending on if there's opportunities, and you're asked to say, we need to bring talent in here, right? I mean,
absolutely. So not only does part of my role is working with employers to help them find their immediate talent that they need, working with our partners across with the Michigan Works system, but it's also part of the team that helps attract folks into Michigan. If we have an employer, actually earlier today I was down in Flint trying to attract another battery manufacturer here into Michigan, and just to be able to not only show the opportunity, show the outstanding talent, show the skilled and workforce that we have, but also bring together all the partners, because no one organization could do it all. We need to work together, and that's another part of what I do, is bring the right people to the table.
You're the right guy for the job. So we have two companies in mid-Michigan that are sort of leading the way in this industry. SK Siltron out of Bay City, Hemlock Semiconductor out of Hemlock Thomas Township. And just to let the viewers know, we did reach out to both of those companies, SK Siltron and Hemlock Semiconductor, but tonight did not work. They had some conflicts, which happens with schedules, which is why you're here. So give us some insight into these two companies. How are they been able to make inroads in this highly competitive and obviously much needed industry?
I'm going to start with Hemlock Semiconductor first. So they have a long history here in the Great Lakes Bay region. And believe it or not, one of the largest, what they produce is a component of in the semiconductor. They are here in our backyard, and they have a worldwide reach. If you own a cell phone, there's a piece of Hemlock Semiconductor inside of it, and part of what they produce. And so they have a really important, critical role. During COVID, we realized that our supply chain had some gaps. When the borders shut down, we realized, wow, there's some components that we don't make here. And so Hemlock is very important in that supply chain, and realizing that component, if we were to onshore that supply chain, we needed to invest in companies like Hemlock Semiconductor to make sure that we can complete all the parts here in the States, so that we're not we don't realize that vulnerability again. SK Siltron, they're a newer addition to our region. They also produce another critical component. They're still in their development phase. They're still getting things up and running, but no less important to the ultimate supply chain to the country, and we'll definitely be able to be part of the solution once we're able to create that ecosystem here in the States.
That's so great to hear, because I think we all remember that we've had these trucks and cars sitting in parking lots waiting for months to get these parts, and I think a lot of us were we'd see it, we'd be a little bit frustrated and say, are we ever going to get some headway? And what I'm hearing from you is just really encouraging.
And also, there's a lot of investment. So the federal government's actually putting billions of dollars on the table specifically for that. It's called the CHIPS Act. And that legislation is meant to help promote not just the supply chain, but also the research and development. And part of Hemlock and SK Siltron's that ecosystem, what we're trying to do here in Michigan, is attract some of those dollars so we can complete the supply chain, so we can provide the fabrication, so we can provide the advanced packaging. So each one of those components can hopefully be onshored and brought here in the state.
Well, we're focused on those two companies that are sort of in the mid-Michigan area. There are other companies like-minded around Michigan. Where are they, and who are they?
Absolutely. So we're working in the Upper Peninsula. The Calumet Electronics, they're doing some outstanding work in the advanced packaging space, which is basically what the microchip sits on, and actually interacts with the rest of the piece of equipment. Also down in the Ann Arbor area, KLA, it's a great, they're also doing a lot of work in the space. But also we're investing with part of this initiative into the schooling. So University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, as well as Michigan Tech, they're all part of the R&D solution. And so we're working with them very closely as well to try to create like I said, the whole picture.
So I've been using the term sort of microchip, semiconductor, almost like they're the same. So just educate us a little that that's not really the case. So, right.
Semiconductor is much more engrossing, so microchip would be part of it.
Right.
And I am not an engineer, so but I do know that semiconductor is basically talks a lot more about the full piece of equipment, and then it even goes even further. So you have advanced packaging, which when I started this role, I thought that was the wrapping that went around it. It's actually not. It's a card that the chip sits on. And so there's a lot of different nuances to how it's called, especially from a technical landscape.
So as far as SK Siltron and Hemlock Semiconductor, how did they end up here? I mean, right in mid-Michigan. They could have gone probably anywhere, and yet somehow we were able to attract them and said, listen, this is where we're going to operate?
The talent, honestly. So Hemlock Semiconductor kind of grew out of a Dow chemical company, so they were all associated, and so then they diverged and broke apart and became their own entity. And so they were here, and there's also a very robust talent space here. So that attracted SK a little bit later because the raw materials are here. Also, SK, they're interested in a lot of the natural resources that we have underneath, kind of the same way that Herbert H. Dow did many years ago. They're attracted to some of the same stuff, and so that also brought them here, the raw materials.
And the SK, it really stands for sort of South Korean, right? Because they're a subsidiary of a South Korean company, but that doesn't really matter, right? I mean,
no. They're their own entity. They're very closely working here. They have their infrastructure is here, so they're a great partner here in the country.
So obviously this is a highly competitive, other states are courting these kinds of companies. Just last year, Michigan courted this semiconductor company, Micron Technology, offering $28 million in subsidies. Wasn't enough, but more into that, I'm sure. But they ended up going to New York State instead. It would have been a $100 billion investment, 50,000 jobs. So what's the game plan here in Michigan to make sure that we've got the right deal in bringing these companies in?
Well, part of it is those incentives. So all the state, everyone's doing it. It's just a matter of who's doing it better. And so recently, Michigan was actually named the 12th best incentives of any state. So definitely, we're upping our game as a state, trying to really attract that investment from not just other U.S. firms, but outside and global. But also, it's things like what I'm doing is working on the talent space. If you talk to 100 CEOs, I think 95 of them will say that talent is their number one issue. And so what we're doing in Michigan and doing it very well is we're bringing everybody together in a unified strategy. So we're bringing our community colleges, our four-year institutions, our PK through 12 space. We're getting them all together working in the same way, trying to focus the talent where the focus needs to be on those occupations that could really not only matter to them long term in providing a living wage, but also matter to Michigan as a whole.
Yeah, we're going to get into that partnership in a moment. And I have a little graphic here I'm showing the viewers in terms of job growth. Projected semiconductor industry's workforce will grow by nearly 115,000 jobs by 2030 from approximately 345,000 jobs today to approximately 460,000 jobs in the decade, representing 33% growth. So those numbers don't surprise you. This is where we're trying to get, right?
And that's just here in Michigan. Worldwide, it's a similar story. I believe there's about 1 million jobs that are in this space that aren't filled or are going to be going unfilled. So this is we are poised right now. If we act, we can definitely monopolize on that need that's coming, because semiconductors are everywhere. Everything we have has semiconductors in it, and if we're able to monopolize on this boom, it'll definitely be beneficial to the state.
It's going to keep you very busy. And just very quickly about these tax incentives, subsidies that we just mentioned, there are some critics out there that say, man, are we giving up too much? We talk about incentives and subsidies, but the reality is there is a bang for the buck. There's an ROI on that.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact numbers, but if you look especially if you look in the manufacturing space, that those subsidies that might be provided for a Micron, imagine 50,000 jobs. That's how many thousands of families. All that trickles down, and then you look into the supply chain, and it grows exponentially. So that investment will always provide an ROI, especially when you're looking at something that is the wave of the future, for example, in the semiconductor space. This is going to be where the trends are going. In the EV mobility space, the internal combustion engine, they will phase out. It's a matter of time. It's being able to make sure that you're poised now to be able to when it's realized, to be on the front edge of that.
Well, you offer incentives. If I were to buy an electric vehicle, I can get as much as, $5,000 to $7,500 off on my taxes I'm doing. So we're all taking advantage of that, of the way that works. Taiwan is one, I'll just mention, I think they're the largest supplier in the world country in terms of microchips. They can keep their cost significantly lower. I'm assuming that. How are we able to sort of compete with that, or is it apples and oranges?
I'd have to say it's more or less apples and oranges.
Okay.
One of the beauties that we have here in Michigan is the automotive industry. We are the birthplace of the automobile. They all need microchips. So if we're able to capitalize on that, and we will drive the production, we'll drive the situation. So it's really apples and oranges. It's the need is so high, the competition isn't really there just yet.
Sure. All right, speaking of labor, let's talk about the MEDC's Talent Action Team, or TAT. I think that's your acronym on that. How it's working with institutions of higher learning, including Delta, to educate people and train in this industry.
So really through the, what we're doing is trying to ultimately meet the needs of the employers. That's our customer. And we feel that if we could meet their needs and provide a skilled labor force, that will kind of equate to living wage for folks. These particular roles, semiconductor, very well-paying jobs. So this is going to help boost up, those individuals who might be unemployed or underemployed, and by partnering with our Michigan Works, our community colleges, as well as our higher level, our 4-year institutions and above, it's able to complete that full talent pipeline. So the ALICE population is one that we're very interested in. That's asset limited, income constrained employed.
Very good.
So
yeah.
people who are basically one flat tire away from unemployment. So if we can help raise them up with a living wage where they don't have to worry about that anymore, I think that really helps out everybody. And then from the employer standpoint, if we're able to produce a labor force that meets their skill needs, not necessarily what we think they are, but what the employer thinks they are, that is going to help them increase their bottom line. So through this initiative, we're working with institutions like Delta College, providing that seed money so that they can provide that. They can work with employers such as Hemlock Semiconductor and SK Siltran to provide the curriculum to train people to get the skill set that they need now and into the future. And that way they have the labor force to do what they need and help create this ecosystem here in the state.
Yeah, helping the ALICE population, those that are sort of lower income, lower skill set, it's big with Delta College President Michael Gavin. He's made that a point of emphasis. And so what would that look like for them as compared to someone that may have a college degree, that might be competing for those kinds of jobs? How does that work?
All honesty, it's all about the skills.
Right.
So through this role is, or through these programs and these curriculums, it's all about the skills that they're acquiring. And these are skills that, these individuals can take wherever they go. So these are non-refundable. You get them, you have them for life. And so that's the key, is these credentials that they're earning could be helped to build into a 4-year degree, or they can go to get these high wage jobs that are being offered by Hemlock Semiconductor and SK Siltran. And so that's really what it looks like. So working with our partners at Michigan Works, as well as Delta College, Delta will create the curriculum. Michigan Works will help find the individuals, or they can just knock on the door of Delta. They'll get the training that they need, whether that's utilizing the federal programming that Michigan Works has, or their own, maybe doing it after their current job. And then they'll be able to get those skills, and then they'll be able to translate that into a full-time employment at one of our, at Hemlock or SK Siltran. So for them, it really means taking from where low wage, low skilled position, and translating that into a high wage, high skilled position.
And kind of what you touched on earlier, by having this partnership, having a lot of these players, all these these institutions of higher learning, Michigan Works, that's a way you've got this team that Michigan can present to these companies and saying, listen, we've got this plan in place. We're prepared. We're ready to go.
Exactly.
Right.
For example, here in the Great Lakes Bay region, there's a program called the Fast Start. And so what it is, it's a customized accelerated training curriculum that Delta College has worked with Dow Chemical to create. Michigan Works helps find the talent, and so what they'll do is use their federal program to help offset the cost, or if not cover it. They'll go to Delta on this customized curriculum, and then they're hired by Dow once they finish it. So that model is actually one that is very similar to what we're creating more on a statewide level. In addition to the investment in Delta College, we're also partnering with Michigan State, University of Michigan, and Michigan Tech to provide what we call the Michigander Scholars Program. And what that does is provide an incentive scholarship to four-year graduates in the engineering or computer science space that what we try to incentivize, they can go anywhere they want, and we try to incentivize them to stay here in Michigan. Michigan's really good at creating engineers and computer scientists. We're not really great at keeping them, and we're trying to reverse that trend as well.
Kind of a brain drain a little bit. Yeah.
Exactly,
right.
and they're critical to a lot of these positions. Engineers, we could not produce enough. Per capita, Michigan produces more engineers than any other state. Unfortunately, we can't keep them. And there's still a demand just in our state where every engineer could stay here. We still wouldn't have enough. So we're trying to reverse that trend and really keep them here.
Interesting. So here at Delta, we have a chemical processing associate's degree in mechanical engineering and mechatronics. I almost said Megatron. Mechatronics, an associate's degree. So if we have local folks that are working towards that, I assume that gives them a leg up to maybe these other opportunities that we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Even through this initiative that Delta received a grant for, they actually, those degrees will actually translate into Michigan State. So they can take that degree here, continue on to get their bachelor's or even their master's at Michigan State, and that's through a partnership under these grants as well. So definitely opening up a lot of doors for the students who are able to participate.
So you had this announcement back in, I think, mid-September for this sort of this partnership, right, on the semiconductor industry. I know a lot of the schools are now just sort of taking it, gearing up. Delta, for instance, I know this week we heard they're still building that curriculum with the intent. The goal is to have it up and running in the fall. So is that the same case with the other schools? So tell us what's happened since September. What do they need to do?
Actually, September now, the big part is that build. All of our partner schools are working to develop those curriculums, working with the employers to understand what are the skill sets that are the ultimate objective, and then put all the pieces in place. And that's what our seed money is really meant to do. It's meant to kind of take away any barriers that would preclude the institutions from working with the employers and to build that curriculum and then have that all in place. And then our intent is to provide additional incentive. So we have funds that we will offset the costs of these trainings for our target employers, and that way in the fall curriculum could start. So very soon Delta College as well as the employers will start working on their recruitment, trying to get folks interested, whether those incumbent workers or new hires, and trying to get them interested in enrolling in these courses.
Is it filtering down to the high schools? We hear so much about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So what role are they having? Absolutely. Part of the grant that Delta will be doing, and it's not universal like this, but we definitely welcome this kind of programming, is going out to schools and showing them all the opportunities. What is a semiconductor? What kind of careers can you do? I do know here in the region that Saginaw Valley, they have the My Career Quest once a year. This is part of that career exploration. But through our grant, Delta is actually going to be taking their mobile lab out to schools. They're looking, they hope to be able to touch over 3,000 students in the next year with the career exposure to the semiconductor space. So being able to expose the kids, show them what kind of careers they can look for, let them hands-on touch, kind of see what it looks like, and then hopefully plant that seed. It's important in this day and age. You know, it's expensive to go to school. We want to make sure the students have that foundation early on so they can go to school and already have a good idea of what they want to do before they get there. So we're not kind of wasting time on exploration, and while they're explaining, they're also more likely to, leave school. And so this way, at least they can get that skill set going early on, so then they can get into the talent space. Here in our region specifically, but also in the state, it's critical that we keep that talent here. And if we can get them on a clear career pathway sooner, we'll be more likely to keep them. A great recruiting tool for the schools. Oh, absolutely. Maybe there's some internship programs, some hands-on things. You have some experience in this with the EV Mobility Partnership that you can hang your hat on. So tell us about that. So that was a similar model that we launched this past winter. So where we did is, instead of looking at semiconductor space, we worked with employers and we worked with higher education institutions across the state to launch a model where we're trying to create an ecosystem surrounding that advanced mobility.
So electrification of vehicles is the future. And so if right now I believe there's about 420,000 jobs in Michigan that are surrounded in the internal combustion engine space. As that space moves towards electrification of vehicles, if we don't move with it, the state will lose all of that. And that's such a large portion of our overall workforce. So part of this is kind of create that space, starting to get that investment going with the training that the employers need, both at the big three level or the tier 1, tier 2 automotive suppliers. Get that start where the curriculums are being developed to meet the skilled needs of those employers, so that we can help them meet their talent needs, because it's a very competitive space, not just in Michigan but also out of it. And so we want to make sure that those companies that are here and those companies that are looking to come here have all the tools they need to succeed in Michigan.
And what we're talking about tonight, whether it's on the semiconductors or the microchips or the EV mobility partnership, they're all sort of tied. This was already sort of in the planning. We're sort of building up to it. Then we hit the pandemic, and now we're post-pandemic. Do you think there's a little bit more of a sense of urgency? Did we learn some things about staff shortages and needs in the economy? Did it change, and we have more of a sense of urgency now since the pandemic?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of, for lack of a better way to say it, a perfect storm. So not only do we have an aging population, but we also, a lot of folks have left the workforce because of the pandemic and things surrounding it. So we're definitely noticing the gaps. Right now, unemployment in Michigan is about 3.8%. To be healthy, a healthy economy needs unemployment between 5 and 7%, which will kind of keep things balanced. So right now we're out of balance. And so any growth that we need, we're running out of places to go. So we have to be very efficient in the way that we build our workforce, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, is add a level of efficiency.
Right.
So we could train people quickly, we could bring people back into the workforce that may have left, and we can also make sure that we are being very inclusive in our workforce. So historically, certain populations may have been overlooked. That's no longer something that can be done. We have to make sure that we're being as inclusive, and we're being as open to try to just bring everybody else back into the
Great.
workforce.
And if they want more information, they can go to the MEDC website.
Yep.
And get all the information you need. So Chris Rishko, thanks for coming in. Great stuff. We're going to bring you back on again once this is all in place. We build the curriculums and it gets some traction. We'll bring you back on. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And that's our show for tonight. But be sure to join us again next week here on The Follow-Up. As we get close to the holidays and winter, families living on the edge of poverty are facing greater needs. How you can help. That's next week here on The Follow-Up. Thanks for joining us tonight, and have a good night.